The galaxy was vast, filled with countless planets, species, and factions. In this chaos, mercenaries were the ones who kept things in check. They were the ones hired to fight, to secure dangerous territories, and to enforce power. Mercenaries like Captain Orvak's crew were among the best. Captain Orvak, a battle-hardened leader from the Zekran species, stood at the helm of his ship, the Blitzwing. His crew was a well-trained, ruthless group, mercenaries who had seen every kind of battle across the galaxy. They feared nothing. From alien warlords to deadly beasts, they had fought it all and came out on top. The galaxy's most dangerous jobs were their specialty, and they were ready for anything. Today, they had a new mission. They were hired by the Galactic Council to capture a ship that had wandered too far into a forbidden zone. The ship, identified as human-owned, was something they expected to be an easy target. Just another cargo ship, filled with ordinary humans, weak, unarmed, and inexperienced in combat. Orvak and his crew had faced much worse, so they were confident. This would be another straightforward job. "We'll have this one wrapped up in no time," Orvak said, his deep voice booming through the ship's command room. He was looking at a holographic map showing the position of the human ship. "They're just humans. They won't even know what hit them." The crew members around him nodded, some chuckling at the thought of an easy paycheck. To them, humans were nothing more than simple, fragile beings. They had no place in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Earth, the home of humanity, had been isolated for centuries, and the humans had never proven themselves to be more than minor players in the galaxy. Orvak felt the familiar rush of excitement. He had seen countless dangerous missions, but this one felt especially easy. They would board the human ship, overpower its crew, and hand it over to the Council. Simple as that. The Blitzwing dropped out of hyperspace just outside the human ship's position. Through the viewports, they saw a simple, unremarkable vessel. It was small, not heavily armed, and certainly not built for combat. The humans aboard had no chance against the Zekron mercenaries. "We've got a clear shot," said Talia, the ship's weapons officer. She was always quick to give the green light for an attack. "Should we take them out now?" "No need," Orvak replied. His eyes narrowed. "Let's board them. The cargo ship is too weak to put up any resistance. We'll do this the easy way. Everyone get ready." The crew prepared their gear, slipping into battle suits and arming themselves with rifles. They were ready for anything, even if it turned out to be a trap. But in their minds, there was no chance the humans were anything but harmless. The boarding craft detached from the Blitzwing and rocketed toward the human ship. The team landed on its hull without incident. They breached the airlock, and within moments they were inside the human vessel. Inside, the ship was quiet. Too quiet. "Something's off," Talia muttered under her breath, scanning the surroundings. The corridors were clean, almost sterile, with no signs of panic or distress. There were no screams, no gunfire, nothing that suggested they were walking into a dangerous situation. "Keep moving," Orvak ordered, his voice steady. "They're probably hiding. Don't let your guard down." The team moved cautiously through the narrow hallways. They heard the faint sound of footsteps ahead. They were getting closer. As they rounded a corner, they found the crew of the human ship. But instead of fear, they were met with calm faces. The human captain, a man named Jason Ward, stood in front of them with a slight smile. "Ah, mercenaries," Ward said, his voice surprisingly smooth. "I've been expecting you." Orvak's eyes narrowed in confusion. "Expecting us? What do you mean?" Ward didn't flinch. "You've come to take me and my ship, right? I'm afraid you're wasting your time. You've walked into the wrong place." Orvak's crew was stunned. This wasn't the reaction they expected. The human captain wasn't scared. In fact, he seemed almost amused. "Get on your knees," Orvak barked, but Ward didn't even flinch. "No," Ward said calmly. "I don't think I will." Orvak felt a growing unease. Humans were supposed to be weak, easily intimidated, but this human, didn't seem to care about their weapons or their reputation. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Orvak said, his voice edged with irritation. "We're here to take you in peacefully. Just surrender." Ward's gaze was calm, yet there was a dangerous edge to it. You think I'm just some helpless traitor, but you'll soon realize that's a mistake. The mercenaries exchanged confused glances. Something was wrong. This wasn't the fight they had expected. Orvak's heart began to race, but he quickly hid it behind a mask of authority. I don't know what games you're playing, but they won't save you. You're coming with us. Ward shook his head, his smile fading. I'm not afraid of you, Orvak. I don't fear mercenaries, and you're going to learn that soon. Orvak was caught off guard. He had always prided himself on his ability to read his opponents, but this human was an enigma. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had underestimated them, and for the first time in his career, he wondered if this mission might not be as easy as he thought. The crew of the Blitzwing started to question their mission. They had been hired to capture a human cargo ship, but the captain's words, his presence, made them doubt everything they knew about humans. They weren't just dealing with traitors or weaklings. There was something more to this human. And, as the tension mounted in the dimly lit hallway, Orvak couldn't help but wonder, what had he gotten himself into? Captain Orvak stood tall, towering over the human captain, Jason Ward. The crew behind him shifted uneasily, sensing something was off. The mercenaries, trained to deal with every kind of situation, had never encountered a target like this before. Ward's calm smile never faded as he looked at Orvak and his crew, unshaken by their weapons and threatening posture. The humans, who should have been quaking in fear, were acting like they were in control of the situation. We're just here for the cargo, Orvak said, his voice deep and commanding. Hand over your ship and surrender without making this difficult. Ward's eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of something calculating behind them. This is where your understanding of the situation falters, mercenary. You think you're in charge. You think you hold all the power, but you don't. Tension hung in the air as the mercenaries exchanged uneasy glances. Ward wasn't afraid. In fact, he didn't even seem to acknowledge their threat. Don't mistake my calmness for fear, Ward continued, his voice low but steady. I have dealt with far worse than mercenaries like you. Orvak's patience was wearing thin. He had expected to overpower the humans quickly and easily, but this was different. Ward wasn't acting like a helpless civilian. He was acting like someone who had been in control of dangerous situations before. What are you talking about? Orvak demanded. You're just humans, nothing special. Ward tilted his head slightly, as if Orvak had just said something amusing. You have no idea what you're dealing with, do you? Without warning, Ward gestured to one of his crew members who was standing nearby. The human moved quickly, almost fluidly, and before Orvak could react, the crew member had disarmed the closest mercenary. The mercenary who had been ready to fight now stood frozen, his weapon gone, looking as if he had never seen combat before. The rest of the mercenaries stiffened, but Ward's crew didn't stop there. Another human moved to disarm a second mercenary. The humans weren't just standing there. They were moving with purpose, their actions swift and practiced. Orvak's mind raced. He knew that human technology was behind the curve compared to other galactic species, but this wasn't about technology. This was something different. The humans weren't just prepared for this situation. They were reacting with a level of training and strategy that caught him off guard. Why don't you tell your men to stand down? Ward's voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. You've underestimated us from the start, and that's a mistake you'll regret. Orvak took a step back, his mind spinning. The crew had expected an easy job, a simple operation where they captured a few helpless humans and took their ship. Instead, they were being shown something new, something they hadn't been prepared for. Stay alert, Orvak barked to his crew, trying to regain control of the situation. Get them! But even as he gave the order, he knew something was wrong. The humans moved with precision, almost like soldiers. They were organized, calculating, and their actions were swift, with a purpose that sent a chill down Orvak's spine. His men were caught off guard, fumbling in ways they never had before. Ward was still standing in front of Orvak, watching him carefully. You came here with arrogance, Ward said, his voice quiet. You thought we were just easy prey, but you were wrong. You're not dealing with just any crew. You're dealing with humans who've survived far worse than anything you could gear. ever throw at us? Orvak's frustration grew. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to be the one calling the shots. He was the leader of the Mercenaries, the ones who were feared throughout the galaxy. But now standing in front of him was a human who seemed more than just a match for him. "We'll see about that," Orvak muttered, his grip tightening on his weapon. But before he could give another order, Ward raised a hand, signaling the humans to stop. There was something in his eyes now, something that made Orvak hesitate. "You don't get it, do you?" Ward asked, his voice almost a whisper. "We've been through things you can't even imagine. We've fought battles in places you've never heard of. We've faced enemies far more dangerous than mercenaries like you. And we survived. We didn't just survive. We conquered. And now, the galaxy will know that humans are not to be underestimated." The words hit Orvak like a punch to the gut. He had heard stories of humans fighting in wars on their home planet, Earth. But those stories always painted them as weak, primitive beings who were too small and too vulnerable to survive in the galaxy's brutal landscape. Yet here they were, standing in front of him, completely unafraid. And somehow, they were in control. "This ends now," Orvak said, his voice filled with determination. "We're not leaving without taking you in." But Ward shook his head, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You don't understand, do you? You're not the ones in control anymore." Ward's crew had taken positions all around the mercenaries, their weapons now visible but lowered. They weren't aiming at the mercenaries, but they were ready. And that was the moment Orvak knew he wasn't the one in charge. The humans had somehow flipped the situation around, and now the mercenaries were the ones who felt vulnerable. Realization hit him hard. They had walked into this mission with no respect for their target, assuming it would be an easy victory. But now, they were learning that these humans weren't the pushovers they had assumed. And that terrified them. Orvak looked around at his crew, who were still on edge, unsure of what to do next. The humans had made their point, and it was clear this wasn't going to be an easy job after all. Ward stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with quiet confidence. "You may have weapons, but we have something you don't. We have the experience, the knowledge, and the will to win. You're just mercenaries. You may be good at what you do, but you've never faced an enemy like us." Orvak knew this was far from over. He had underestimated the humans, and now the game had changed. They weren't just weak, unarmed beings. They were something much more dangerous. And for the first time in a long while, Orvak wasn't sure who would win this battle. Captain Orvak stood still, his thoughts racing. The shift in power was undeniable. The humans had turned the tables. What was supposed to be a simple mercenary job had become a nightmare, and he had no idea how to get control back. Ward, the human, captain, stood just a few steps away, his hands still relaxed at his sides. He didn't look like a man who had just disarmed half of Orvak's crew. In fact, he didn't seem to be worried at all. There was no fear in his eyes, no sign of panic, just a cold, steady confidence. Orvak's mind raced. What kind of humans were these? One of his men, Talia, spoke up, her voice unsteady. "What's going on here, Captain? They're not like any humans I've ever heard of." "I don't know," Orvak muttered. His grip on his weapon tightened, but it did nothing to steady his growing unease. He had never been caught off guard like this before. Ward glanced at Orvak, as if sensing his discomfort. "You still don't get it, do you? You think you've caught us off guard, but the truth is, we've been waiting for you." "Waiting?" Orvak repeated, confused. "Of course," Ward said, smiling faintly. "We knew the mercenaries would come sooner or later. The galaxy has always underestimated humanity, thinking we're weak or primitive, but we've been preparing for a long time." Orvak couldn't believe his ears. The humans weren't just random travelers or helpless civilians, they were ready for battle. "What do you mean, preparing? You're just humans. You can't have the resources or the training to stand up to us." Ward shook his head slowly. "That's the mistake everyone makes. They see us as weak because they don't know our true strength. They don't know our history. You think the mercenaries of the galaxy are the toughest fighters? You've never seen what humanity is capable of when we're backed into a corner. One of the mercenaries, a young soldier named Rix, spoke up nervously. "We've faced your kind before. Earth's nothing but a backwater planet. What could you possibly be preparing for?" Ward's eyes darkened slightly. "We've fought wars that you wouldn't even imagine. Wars against enemies that were far stronger, far more advanced than anything you've faced. We've been through hell and come out on top." Orvac took a step back, his mind struggling to process what Ward was saying. Could it be true? Could humans have been secretly building strength for centuries? What if they weren't the easy targets everyone believed them to be? Ward continued, his voice quieter now but filled with conviction. "The galaxy thinks it's seen all there is to see. But humanity's time is coming. We've spent years preparing, building our own technologies, honing our skills, and now you've come to face us and you've learned just how much you've underestimated us." Orvac felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't what he had expected. His crew had made a critical error in judgment. They had assumed that humans were weak, that they were an easy target. But now it was clear that they had miscalculated. The humans had prepared for this moment, and it was Orvac and his crew who were out of their depth. "Why did you leave Earth?" Orvac asked, his voice suddenly wary. "If you were so ready for this, why did you stay hidden?" Ward smiled, though there was no humor in his expression. "You think we've been hiding? No. We've been observing. We've been learning. Earth was never meant to stay isolated forever. And now that we've made our mark, the galaxy will have to recognize us for what we truly are." Orvac could feel the ground shifting beneath him. The humans weren't just players in the galaxy. They were becoming a force to be reckoned with. But what could they want from the mercenaries? Why had they allowed them to board their ship in the first place? Ward seemed to sense Orvac's confusion. "You were never meant to be our enemies. You were just part of the plan. You were part of the test." "The test?" Orvac repeated, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "You think we wanted a fight?" Ward said, raising an eyebrow. "No, mercenaries, we wanted to see how you'd react. We wanted to see if you'd take the bait. And you did." Orvac's stomach twisted. "We were a test? For what?" "For the galaxy," Ward replied calmly. "For the galaxy to see that humans are not to be underestimated, that we have the strength to defend ourselves, to rise above the chaos and to make a place for ourselves in this vast, dangerous universe. And if we have to show the galaxy what we can do with mercenaries like you, then so be it." Orvac's mind struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what Ward was saying. The humans weren't just interested in surviving. They were preparing for something much bigger. They wanted to take their place among the stars, and they were willing to show everyone that they had the power to do it. The tension in the room was thick, and Orvac could feel the weight of Ward's words pressing down on him. This wasn't a simple mission anymore. The humans had just revealed their cards, and they had power. "I think it's time for you to leave," Ward said, stepping back. His crew stood ready, their eyes sharp and focused. They weren't afraid. They weren't backing down. Orvac hesitated. He didn't know how to respond. The humans were making it clear that they were not going to be easily defeated. They were a force in their own right, and the mercenaries were standing in their way. For the first time in a long while, Orvac felt out of his depth. "We'll leave," Orvac said, his voice strained. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew it was the only option. "But we'll be watching you. Don't think you've won." Ward smiled, the edge of a warrior's confidence in his eyes. "You can watch all you want, but the next time you come for us, you'll find a very different story." Orvac and his crew slowly backed away, their weapons lowered but their minds racing. They had come here to take control, to dominate, but it was clear now that they were the ones who were outmatched. As they left the ship, Orvac's thoughts were filled with one question. How had humans become so powerful? And what did this mean for the galaxy's future? The Blitzwing flew silently through space, the soft hum of the engines the only sound filling the bridge. Captain Orvac stood at the front of the command room, staring out at the stars. His mind was still spinning from what had happened aboard the human ship. For the first time in years, he felt a knot in his stomach. He was a mercenary, a leader of one of the most feared crews in the galaxy. Yet in all his years of fighting, he had never encountered an enemy like the humans. They weren't supposed to be like this. They weren't supposed to be a challenge. How did they do it? Talia's voice broke through Orvak's thoughts. The weapons officer stood at the back of the room, still shaken from the encounter. We were ready for anything, and yet they turned the tables on us. I don't know, Orvak admitted, his voice low. He turned to face her. But one thing's for sure. We can't take them lightly anymore. Those humans, they have something we didn't expect. And that scares me. Do you think they were telling the truth? Rix, the young soldier who had been disarmed earlier, asked quietly. About their history and what they've been through? Orvak glanced at Rix, his expression hardening. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. The fact is, those humans were prepared. They were ready for us, and they outplayed us at every turn. A tense silence fell over the crew. Orvak's words had struck a chord with all of them. No one had ever doubted their abilities before. They were mercenaries, after all. But now, facing humanity, they realized they might have underestimated the humans' potential. Tragically so. We need a new plan, Orvak said, finally breaking the silence. We can't just go back there like we planned. Those humans have something up their sleeves. We need to figure out what it is before we move forward. The crew nodded in agreement, their faces filled with determination. Despite the shock of the earlier encounter, they knew they couldn't let their pride get in the way of survival. They had been caught off guard once, but it wouldn't happen again. Hours passed as the Blitzwing drifted toward the edge of the sector where they had encountered the human ship. Orvak sat alone in his quarters, his mind racing. The humans had been calm, calculated, and more than capable. He knew they were no ordinary targets, but how had they become like this? Where had they gained such strength? A quiet chime interrupted his thoughts. He glanced up at the holo projector, where the image of the Galactic Council's representative flickered into view. Orvak's expression hardened as he recognized the familiar face. Captain Orvak, the representative said, his voice formal. We've been monitoring your mission. The human ship you encountered, can you confirm the outcome? Orvak took a deep breath. Yes, we boarded the ship, as instructed. However, the situation has changed. The humans were not what we expected. They fought back, better than anyone could have predicted. There was a brief pause before the representative responded. I see. You're saying the humans were more powerful than anticipated? Not just powerful, Orvak replied, his voice tight. They were prepared. They knew we were coming. They acted like they'd planned for this, and they outsmarted us at every turn. I understand, the representative said. You're not the only ones who've underestimated humanity. However, the Council is not concerned with your personal failure. We are more interested in the larger implications. Implications? Orvak repeated, confused. The Council has been monitoring humanity's activities for some time. They've been quiet, isolated from the rest of the galaxy, but they've been watching. It seems they've been preparing for something. Something big. Orvak's mind raced. What do you mean? The humans are not the weak species the galaxy once thought. They've been training, developing technology, and most importantly, they've been gathering information. They've been watching the galaxy's most powerful factions for years, learning from them. Orvak's heart sank. You're telling me they've been hiding their strength all this time? That's exactly what I'm saying, the representative said. And now it seems they're ready to reveal themselves. The Council had hoped to keep humanity isolated, but that may no longer be possible. They've learned too much and their time has come. Orvak felt a cold sweat run down his back. This was worse than he had imagined. The humans were not just surviving. They had been preparing to rise. The implications for the entire galaxy were staggering. They weren't just hiding, Orvak murmured, more to himself than to the representative. They were watching, learning, planning, and now they're ready to take their place among the stars. The representative's voice was calm but edged with concern. Yes, Captain. Humanity is no longer just another insignificant species. And if the Council doesn't act soon, They may become the most dangerous power in the galaxy. Orvac stood up, his fists clenched. The mercenaries had come to the human ship expecting to take control, expecting to dominate. But now, they were part of something much bigger, a galaxy on the verge of a shift in power. "We need to be ready," Orvac said, his voice determined. "We need to figure out what humanity's next move is before they turn the tables on us again." "Agreed," the representative replied. "You'll be kept informed. The council is considering its options. But for now, you should keep a low profile. Watch, observe, and be prepared. If the humans decide to act, the galaxy may never be the same." As the holo projector flickered out, Orvac's mind buzzed with new information. The humans were no longer just a problem to be solved. They were a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time in his career, Orvac wondered if his mercenary crew was ready for the battle that lay ahead. Back on the human ship, Jason Ward stood with his crew, watching the Blitzwing retreat. He had known this day would come. The galaxy had always underestimated humanity, but that was about to change. The time for hiding was over. Humanity was ready to step into the larger stage of galactic power. "We've done what we needed to do," Ward said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "Now, we wait. The galaxy will come to us, and when they do, we'll be ready." His crew nodded, each one silently acknowledging the weight of what they had set in motion. The human crew wasn't just surviving anymore, they were preparing to lead. And with each passing moment, the universe was starting to realize the truth. Humans were no longer the prey. They were the hunters. Captain Orvac paced back and forth in the command room of the Blitzwing. His mind had been racing since the conversation with the Galactic Council. The fear that had settled in his chest was not something he was accustomed to. As a mercenary, leader, fear was something he never allowed himself to feel. But humanity had shaken him, and his crew. The images of the human crew, standing tall and confident, their eyes showing no fear even in the face of overwhelming odds, haunted him. He had never imagined that Earth's people would have so much power hidden away. He had underestimated them, and now it felt like the whole galaxy would soon pay the price. Orvac turned to his crew, who were standing silently around the room waiting for his orders. The tension was thick and no one dared speak. "We need to act," Orvac said, his voice a little hoarse. "The humans are no longer a small, weak species. They've spent years building up their strength, watching the rest of the galaxy, and now they're ready. We can't ignore them any longer." Talia, the weapons officer, was the first to speak. "What do we do now, Captain? We can't go back to the council. They'll want us to deal with the humans, but we saw what happened. They're not the ones we expected." Orvac looked out the viewport at the stars stretching before them. He knew they couldn't afford to face the humans again without proper preparation, but that didn't mean they were out of options. "We're going to track them, learn their next move before they learn ours. We'll need more intel," Rix, the young soldier, said. "They're smart. They've been planning for this, but we haven't seen their full power yet. We need to know what they've got hidden." Orvac nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do. We're not going in blind again. We're going to study them, and when we're ready, we'll make our move." The next few days were filled with tense silence. The Blitzwing remained hidden in the outer reaches of space, far from the human ship and the sector where they had first encountered them. Orvac had ordered his crew to stay sharp, to prepare for whatever might come next. They knew the humans weren't just hiding anymore. They were watching and waiting, ready to take action. Orvac knew that he couldn't be the only one watching them. The galaxy's power structures had already taken notice of what was happening. The Council, the alien warlords, the trade factions. They would all be looking to make a move. If humanity could rise from the shadows, then all bets were off. One morning, Orvac gathered his crew in the command room. "The humans aren't sitting idle," he said. "We've seen what they can do when they're pushed. But now it's time to take a step back. It's not just about surviving anymore, it's about taking control." Talia raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll try to take control of the galaxy?" "I don't know yet," Orvac said. "But we need to find out what they're after. We need to understand them before they understand us." Just as he finished speaking, the alert systems in the Blitzwing flashed. Orvac rushed to the control panel, his heart racing. "Captain, we're picking up a message," Talia said. "It's from a human ship, one of their high-ranking officers." "Put it through," Orvac ordered. The screen flickered, and the face of Jason Ward, the human captain, appeared on the holo projector. He was calm, as always, but there was a glint in his eyes that told Orvac this was not just a casual conversation. "You've been quiet," Ward said, his voice smooth and measured. "I would have thought that by now you'd be coming for us mercenaries, but it seems you've learned your lesson." Orvac's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Ward?" Ward's smile remained, though there was no warmth in it. "What we want is simple. We want the galaxy to understand something. The humans are not here to be ignored. We've been watching, preparing, and now it's our turn. We are no longer the quiet, isolated species you thought we were." Orvac's heart pounded. "What are you planning? What do you want with the galaxy?" Ward leaned forward slightly. "What we want is not to be underestimated. The galaxy has turned its back on us for too long, but now we're ready to step out of the shadows. And you, mercenaries, are our first message." "Message?" Orvac repeated, growing uneasy. Ward's expression hardened. "Yes. This is your final warning. The humans are not a race to be feared only in battle, but a race to be respected. We don't need to fight every war, but if we have to, we'll fight it to win." The communication ended abruptly, and the room fell silent. Orvac stared at the empty holoprojector screen, his mind reeling. He knew that Ward's words were not just a threat. They were a promise. Back on the human ship, Ward stood in front of his crew, who had gathered for a meeting. His expression was steady, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. "They've learned that we're not just survivors," Ward said. "We've been preparing for this for a long time. The galaxy will no longer treat us as insignificant. We've proven ourselves once again, but this time, we need more than just survival. We need respect. And we will take it." His crew nodded. In agreement, the same calm determination on their faces. The battle for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. "We've made our first move," Ward continued. "Now we wait. The galaxy will come to us, and when they do, they'll understand that humanity has a place here." As the days passed, Orvac couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had already moved far beyond what they had ever thought possible. The humans were no longer just isolated. They were emerging as a new force in the galaxy, one that no one could ignore. For the first time in his career, Orvac realized the truth. Humanity was no longer just a species to be used or defeated. They were a rising power, and the galaxy was going to have to adjust to their presence. He knew his crew wasn't ready to face them again, not without proper knowledge. But as the humans prepared for whatever came next, Orvac couldn't help but wonder if the galaxy itself was ready for the storm that was about to come. In the quiet of space, the calm before the storm seemed to stretch on forever. But Orvac knew, one thing for certain, the universe would soon learn what humans were capable of. And it wouldn't be long before everyone saw that humans were not just survivors. They were conquerors.